This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your headlines. Pro-Russian officials in Kherson in southern Ukraine say they'll ask President Putin for the region to join Russia in a signal that Moscow may annex the province. Ukraine cuts Russian gas flowing to Europe via a key pipeline as the EU remains in a deadlock over its Russian oil ban.
Here in theCUBE, we look at Russian troll accounts that have been artificially distorting online narratives about the Ukraine war.
And veteran Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh is shot and killed during an Israeli raid in the occupied West Bank. I'm Helena Humphrey. Good to have you with us. Russia says it will let the residents of the occupied city of Kherson decide their own fate, following reports that the city's Moscow-backed authority is seeking annexation. Now, Kherson was the first major Ukrainian city to fall following the Russian invasion. And according to Russian news agencies, the region's new administration will ask the Kremlin if it can join Russia. Kyiv, meanwhile, says that Moscow has been planning to rig a referendum in its favor. It has accused Russian forces of collecting personal information on the city's residents ahead of a planned vote. Well, our international correspondent Annalise Borges joins me now from Mykolaiv in the south of the country. Good to see you there, Annalise. Good evening to you. You've been travelling around the south of Ukraine. Tell me what you've been seeing there.
Indeed, we travelled here to Mykolaiv, this strategic city on the banks of the Yuzhny Buk River, to get to understand how the resistance is being organized. This is a major strategic hub for the resistance being put by Ukrainian soldiers, because 60 kilometers to the east of here is Kherson, that city that's now occupied by Russian troops, and from where Russian soldiers have been trying to push to the east. They have hit this city multiple times in recent weeks. While we were talking to people in the city today, we heard the explosions, we heard the shelling that continues to go on the front line, and including from the heart of the city, the regional administration building. That's where we went to meet the regional governor of this province, Vitaly Kim, who spoke to us about the fighting, about the situation on the front line. He said that soldiers have no other choice but to continue to fight, residents alike as well. He says that the situation is difficult in this city that has seen a significant amount of shelling, but that people are almost used to it now. Indeed, people seem to resist to go about their business. He said that troops on the front lines are not necessarily making progress, but they are able to hold their ground, at least for now. But indeed, the situation in this entire region in the south of Ukraine is extremely tense. We have seen reports, including from U.S. intelligence agencies, that Russia could be trying to shift the focus here in order to capture this corridor on the Black Sea coast, in order to annex, in order to connect the east of Ukraine that they already hold, including Crimea Peninsula, all the way, of course, to Transnistria, that part of territory in Moldova occupied by the Russians.
Annalise, you just mentioned there your proximity to Kherson and the situation there. We've also been hearing today that pro-Russian authorities there in Kherson will ask President Putin to join Russia. What more can you tell us about the situation there?
Indeed, we heard about those news, that information that local authorities would be asking for the annexation of Kherson. And to be honest, here the news hasn't really echoed yet. Quite a lot of people that we spoke to, including soldiers, didn't even know about that. The regional governor said that was fake news, that there was no such a thing as separatists in Kherson, at least, of course, among civilians there. We understand that that could indeed change things. It could increase the tension in this area. For now, at least, the situation goes on as normal, as usual, or at least as usual during this war. Of course, soldiers here are very determined to take Kherson back. I asked Vitaly Kim, the governor, about that and whether or not this could indeed change the strategy of Ukrainian troops on the ground. And he said it changes nothing. They will continue pushing forward and they will take territory back. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. Once again, this could indeed heighten Russia's motivation to push further east. And of course, Mykolaiv and then Odessa could be next on Putin's target list.
All right, Annalise Borges, our international correspondent there, reporting from Mykolaiv in the south of Ukraine. Good to have you reporting, Annalise. Thank you. Well, we can go straight over now and get the Russian perspective from our correspondent Galina Polanskaya, who joins me now. Galina, we've just been talking about Kherson, the situation there. We've been hearing also today from the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, about this situation, about a referendum for Kherson to join Russia. I want to ask you this. Is this similar to the situation and the quote-unquote referendum that we saw take place in Crimea in 2014?
Good evening, Helena. Well, Dmitry Peskov was asked exactly the same question as you have just mentioned. There was this announcement by the Kremlin-installed occupation authorities in Kherson, who are presented in Russia as the legal authorities there. So what they said is actually that Kherson does not need any referendum. They said that Kherson was Russia and that they will just simply ask Vladimir Putin to issue a decree making Kherson a part of Russia. So journalists asked Dmitry Peskov if Vladimir Putin was ready to accept this suggestion, this plan, and he said, quote, that such decisions must be absolutely legitimate, that it should be a choice of those who live in Kherson, that they should be absolutely legitimate as it was in Crimea, end of quote. And after he was asked if there was a plan to hold a referendum, we know that that's what happened in Crimea. Russia staged a referendum and after declared Crimea to be a Russian territory, annexed it. Dmitry Peskov said, quote, I did not say anything about referendum, so we do not know what the plan is, but indeed all of this is showing that Moscow may aim to annex this province.
All right, Galina. Meanwhile, we've also been hearing from the Kremlin with regards to UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who headed over to Finland. And we know previously that the Kremlin had some pretty strong words for any countries looking to join NATO. Finland, Sweden, for example, talking of military and political repercussions if they did so. So what did they have to say about the visit of Boris Johnson today?
Well, Dmitry Peskov said that the Kremlin was observing very, very closely everything which is linked with the perspectives of Sweden and Finland joining NATO. So it is clear that Moscow is watching this visit step by step very closely. He said that everything which is connected with actions that are capable of changing the configuration of NATO next to Russia's borders is a subject of a very, very careful analysis. And indeed, in the past, Russia had warned a lot, and the Kremlin said that if those countries join NATO, it would not bring stability to Europe. And one of closest President Putin's allies, Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy head of Russia's Security Council, had warned that it would mean that there would be no nuclear status of Baltic, hinting at additional nuclear deployments in Europe.
All right, Galina Polanskaya, as ever, great to get your analysis. Thank you, Galina. Well, tracking the latest developments across the country is our correspondent Sasha Vakulina, and she joins me here in the studio. Sasha, one development we heard today from Ukraine, of course, is that it's redirecting a flow of gas to avoid a key transit point from Russia to Europe. What will this move mean for Europe?
Now, indeed, the gas flows were suspended about 7 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday today, but it was on one point. This is Sokhanivka point, although that is important because about a third of Russian gas that transits Ukraine passes exactly through this point. Now, why did it happen? Ukraine said, of course, that because of this station, it is situated in the territories that are occupied currently by Russian forces, and therefore they claim there is an interference by occupying force. Instead, Kyiv offered to redirect some of those gas flows through another route, and this is where Moscow said no to that. What kind of repercussions and impact could that have? Well, in short term, probably there will be some sort of panic and the prices might go up, but in fact, short term, there won't be much of impact for European countries in the coming weeks, put it that way. But what is important here is that now the European countries, those that do depend so much on Russian gas, they are trying to fulfill their storage facilities. This is what they're trying to do for the next winter season, because we know with all the situation with the war that's been happening between Russia and Ukraine, and also with this ruble or euro payments and how Europe is trying to not to depend that much when it comes to Russian energy flows. They're trying to do that. And in order to do that, for the moment, EU gas storage facilities are about 37% full, but this is well short of the 80% target the bloc has set for November. Will they be able to fulfill that target? This is why it is so important, whether that will have impact in the coming months.
So still a bit of uncertainty there over that situation. But meanwhile, on the ground, we're now hearing that Ukrainian forces have managed to retake some villages in Kharkiv in the northeast. What does that tell us about the state of the battle there?
There's been really heavy fighting there around Kharkiv for weeks and weeks, and we have heard now that indeed Ukrainian forces managed to liberate and to take back some of those towns. And according to a Russian source that was quoted by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian troops advanced to within 10 kilometers of the Russian border. This is a significant achievement and a significant development of the situation on the ground in Kharkiv. The further the Ukrainian forces manage to counteroffensive and push Russian forces to the north away from Kharkiv, that means that they will not be able to keep shelling Kharkiv suburbs, because this is what we've been seeing. Not probably the city center of Kharkiv itself, the second largest city in Ukraine, but the suburbs has been under constant shelling there. Now, they will have to push a little bit more further in order to make sure that they make it to the border between Russia and Ukraine. And this is when they can try to just install Ukrainian forces and control that territory. But that does not change much in terms of the current situation in the east, although it will have effect towards Izium. This is such a crucial point there in the east towards Kharkiv, because if the Russian forces are pushed from there, they will not be able to make other advances from the Izium axis. So it does have impact on the situation in the east of Ukraine.
All right, so certainly a significant moment there. Sasha Vakalina, as ever, great to have your insights. Thank you, Sasha. Well, still to come, protesters in Sri Lanka burn politicians' houses to the ground as the country plunges further into crisis. We'll be bringing you up to date after the break. Welcome back. Good to have you along. Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh has been shot and killed in the occupied West Bank town of Jenin while covering an Israeli raid. The veteran reporter was hit by a bullet in the face despite wearing a clearly signed press vest. The Qatar-based media network says that Abu Akleh was shot deliberately and in cold blood by the Israeli Defense Forces. The Israeli government initially said it was likely she was killed by Palestinian gunmen, but has since said that the exact circumstances have yet to be determined. Members of her family have spoken about their devastating loss.
She wasn't just my aunt, she's also my best friend, my second mom, my companion. She was my everything. She's someone I've been looking up to ever since I was a kid, watching all of her reports. And I never thought this day would come where the news would be about her and she won't be the one who's covering the news.
Well, the EU, US and UN have also called for an investigation into Shireen Abu Akleh's death. Earlier, the chief of the EU's mission to the West Bank and Gaza emphasised the importance of journalists being able to do their jobs safely.
Shireen was, and actually she is, because she stays in our memory, an example how important it is to have media reporting on what authorities are doing. You're not going to have democracy, you're not going to have freedom, you're not going to have preservation of human rights unless you have strong, independent media and journalists. We immediately called for a swift and independent investigation so that the perpetrators of this terrible crime can be brought to justice.
The EU has unveiled proposals to clamp down on online child abuse in the bloc, but privacy activists have criticised the measures, warning that it would usher in mass surveillance of people's encrypted messages. Christopher Pitchers reports now.
The figures are frightening. In 2021 alone, 85 million images or videos showing child victims of sexual abuse have been reported worldwide. To combat this dramatic surge, which worsened during the pandemic, the European Commission is proposing to strengthen its current legislation. And it also underlines the magnitude of tackling the issue at hand.
The report on photos and videos of child sexual abuse that is linked to the European Union has increased with 6,000% the last 10 years. Of the child sexual abuse material, 90% is hosted in the European Union globally.
Based on its proposals, Brussels wants to move from a voluntary system of illegal content detection to a compulsory procedure. Service providers and digital platforms would have to monitor their services for any possible misuse. Companies would have to detect and then report such material to a new European centre aimed at combating child sexual abuse. Such content would then have to be removed as soon as possible. Children's rights groups welcome the new measures.
We're living in a time and an era where children are getting connected to the internet at a much younger age. And we're seeing now in the Belgian context, but actually this is worldwide, that in 4 years' time, the average age of a first smartphone went down from 12 years old to 8 years old. But this has a huge impact on how children deal with the internet and how they are able to avoid risk behavior.
Service providers and digital platforms are raising concerns about privacy, however. The Commission says the least intrusive tools possible would be used to address these concerns. Christopher Pitchers, Euronews, Brussels.
The Sri Lankan military has been deployed on the streets of the capital Colombo as the country's authorities try to quell anti-government protests. Following weeks of demonstrations, tensions boiled over on Monday after protesters clashed with police. At least 8 people were killed and 219 injured. Security officials have been given orders to shoot anyone deemed involved in violence. Protesters say that the Rajapaksa regime's brutally cracking down on opposition voices. The US Senate is set to hold a vote to preserve abortion rights over fears that the Supreme Court will repeal women's constitutional right to terminate a pregnancy. President Joe Biden has called on Democratic senators to codify abortion into law. However, the vote is not expected to pass due to Republican Party opposition. The EU will end the requirement to wear masks at airports and on planes from next week, but rules for flights may vary depending on where the plane is taking off from and landing, according to individual countries' rules. Authorities say that people should remain responsible and consider still wearing masks, especially if they're sneezing or coughing. Still to come on Euronews, Matthew in the Cube has been looking at Russian troll accounts.
A network of social media profiles has been amplifying Moscow's narrative about the war in Ukraine. We'll take a closer look after the break.
You're watching Euronews tonight. Thanks for joining me. Well, as fighting on the ground continues in Ukraine, online a war of information and propaganda has been raging. Western countries have accused Russia of setting up networks of fake social media accounts to try and manipulate the narrative. Let's find out more now with Matthew in the Cube.
Well, Helena, major social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are blocked not just in Russia, but also in the Russian-backed separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. But ever since the war began, Moscow has, on these platforms, also been waging an online war of information. Research funded by the UK government has recently claimed that the Kremlin has used a troll factory of accounts to post positive comments, not just on social media, but also in the online sections of popular websites. The claim is that people are being hired to post hundreds of positive comments about Russia each day, targeting both politicians, but also journalists and media organisations across Europe, as well as in countries like India and South Africa. The aim, the research by the UK says, is to try and manipulate public opinion about Russia's invasion of Ukraine and to amplify support for President Vladimir Putin. And some of the tactics they've been using have become quite diverse. Many of these accounts have used the genuine photos or avatars of social media influencers, posting hashtags like I stand with Russia and I stand with Putin. This is an example of inauthentic coordinated behavior. Some of the support for Russia is genuine, but a lot of these accounts were created in the days after the war began, and they've posted very little original content. Well, to combat this, some of those platforms have been trying to take action. Twitter, for one, bans any of these accounts from impersonating other people or from manipulating or spamming online conversations. Twitter says that they have taken down more than 100,000 accounts linked to this inauthentic, coordinated behavior. But in the meantime, Helena, Moscow has also denied any accusations, both now and in the past, that it has carried out disinformation campaigns like the ones we've seen since the war in Ukraine began.
Well, Matthew, imagine finding out that one of your photos had been used in that way. Thank you so much for bringing us up to date on that story. Well, we leave you now with a no comment from the breathtaking Davutoglu National Park in Turkey, where the arrival of spring has prompted a fresh influx of migratory birds. Thanks for watching Euronews Tonight.